Tommy, welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast, mate. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. We've got a few mutual friends, and obviously I'm relatively invested in the Phoenix with Creaky playing down there, and Danielle and I get down to all the games. So been keen to get you on for a while. So it'd be good to have a chat, man. The first thing I wanted to actually ask you straight off the bat was, what were some of the main things that you guys kept in mind when starting to structure your team from the ground up? Obviously, Southeast Melbourne, only second season, just finished second season in the league. So starting a team from the ground up, what were the main things that you guys had in mind when trying to put a playing group together?
So specifically about the playing group, or sort of setting up the entire club?
First off, yeah, specifically with the playing group in terms of how you wanted that to look and whether or not, you expected the first year to be competitive or whether it's something you wanted to build into.
No worries. Yeah. So look, I think, this speaks a little broader than a playing group as well, but from day one, starting with such a clean slate, and, you would have heard the story so many times, along the way, but legitimately starting from a piece of paper, as daunting as that is, comes with a lot of opportunity as well, because, having been involved in the sport for my whole life, obviously got some pretty locked in thoughts on how I think things should operate and how teams should be built and put together and structured and all of those things. So being able to start with a really clean slate, I saw as a real advantage. And the one thing that Simon and I, in terms of the roster, really wanted to get right from day one was the culture of the playing group and performance department. We wanted to be really, talking specifically about that department, we wanted to be really players focused. We wanted to, replicate an NBA sort of program as best we could, and make sure that we, were providing, the highest level of sort of facilities and resources to our players, so that, when you put all that together, the culture of the group and you bring in hardworking and dedicated athletes, and all those peripheral things, you sort of set yourself to becoming a bit of a destination franchise, which makes recruiting easier, immediately. Basically, you go into year two and recruiting's a lot easier than it was in year one, and et cetera, et cetera. So for us, it wasn't necessarily about coming out and, winning a title year one. Were we trying to win the title year one? Of course we were.
Yeah.
But, there's some realities around that. And
started like a house on fire that first season.
Yeah, we did. But for us, it was really about sort of the people we brought in to that playing group.
Yep.
That's why you saw players like Ben Madgen, professional. Like this guy was a pro's pro. We really wanted to tick that box because we knew that, whoever we retained from year one into year two, that's what we would have had set in stone. Knew we could top up the list with talent in years to come, as we got more shots at free agency and recruiting internationally. But we knew that if we got the culture piece wrong from day one, that we'd be spending the next 5 years trying to fix it.
Yeah. Is that something you kept in mind, or even to this day, like you mentioned culture and how important it is? You may have a guy who fills up the stat sheet every week, but just brings horrible culture, like toxicity to the club. Is that something you keep in mind when you are recruiting? Is it not just about their playing ability, but also what they can bring to the team off the court?
Yeah, 100%. That's something we hold incredibly close. We're very blunt in our recruiting as well. Like when we sit with international prospects and local prospects, we don't sugarcoat a lot of the stuff we do. We're very open about how involved in the community we are and how important that is to us. Like there is the on-court portion of coming and being a part of this club, but there's a broader part to that as well, which is, a willingness and a legitimate desire to invest time and invest a player's time and commitment to those community programs and embedding ourselves in that community. So for us, absolutely, like still remains to this day, a number one recruiting priority. They have to tick that box.
When we talk about building a good culture and setting, I guess, the tone from day one, what were some of the things that I guess you tried to instill in the playing group and the staff in the club? You know, the values. You know, I've had a few guests on the show like around the topic of personal development, and something that just continues to come up over and over again is just knowing your values and how important it is, and making sure that it's not just someone barking orders to the playing group or to your staff or whatever it may be, but just everyone kind of lives those values from a day-to-day basis. Like, was there some key things that you really tried to instill in the club from day one in terms of values?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from day one, we wanted to be it's a funny sort of line I was using a lot as we were starting this club up, but we wanted to be a professional club with a community focus.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be pegged as a community club just because we were based out in the Southeast and we're a new team. We wanted to be seen as one of the top tier clubs, but with a really heavy community focus.
Yeah.
To this day, that sort of still sings true as to how we operate as a franchise. In terms of those sort of values of the playing group, we really wanted to represent what the Southeast community of Melbourne really is. Like, these are basketball fans, that is throw around the word heartland, but it's for a good reason. I mean, 25% of Australia's basketball participation is out in that region, and they know their hoops. They're hardworking, they're fundamental. They play the game the right way. Sort of blue collar basketball, and that's something that we really wanted to reflect on the court in terms of the product we're putting out on the floor. And once again, to this day, that's something we hold on to, and we want to make sure that we are an actual reflection of Southeast Melbourne basketball on a national stage.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Like, just thinking about it now. Obviously, I mentioned to you off the podcast, Creaky and I are really good mates, and we both played Big V with Horsham, and being from a country town, like, you have that. It's almost a very similar feel, but on a much bigger scale now. Like, you come to the games, and I've even got a bunch of clients who are members of Southeast Melbourne, and it's that similar vibe, it's similar feel. It almost feels like the fans seem to be a lot more invested in the club because it feels like they're a part of it, compared to, like you mentioned, you might use another example of a different club who may be super professional, but they don't really have much to do with the community at all. So it is a bit of a different feel. It's almost like a big country club, if in some regard, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way of putting it, and something we've worked hard on. And I think that anyone who comes to games here in Melbourne can really sort of identify that difference between the clubs down here, and it's something we're really proud of, something we're going to continue to push, because we're the club with a bit of a chip on our shoulder, and that's the sort of the region of Victoria that we're representing.
In terms of where you feel like the league's at the moment, obviously over the past 18 months or however long it's been now, shit's hit the fan a little bit in terms of how the simplicity of I guess progressing the league and the games, and even just like getting crowds in and stuff like that. But I think it's fair to say, like, the league's probably in the best position it's been in a long time, in terms of people coming to watch, like the excitement or the hype around the games, and the amount that actually gets talked about off court now, just from general public as well. Especially prior to COVID, how did you see the position of the league with like the Next Stars program, with guys like LaMelo Ball coming, and all of a sudden you've got international eyes on the game, and it's just starting to grow in more popularity, and even looking at some of the signings that the league's getting with the imports, and even Aussie guys that are choosing to come and play here instead of going to college or even coming back from overseas. Like, how do you think the league's looking at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think the league's in just an incredible position at the moment, and I feel like you talk to anyone from any sport, this is how they're going to talk, but it's actually the reality. Going into COVID, I was sort of quoting quite often that we're in the golden era of basketball in Australia, and since then, things have continued to go the right direction, even throughout this pandemic. You talk about things like the Boomers meddling, the Australian talent coming home, the Next Stars program, which has now got, not just America, which we always sort of fall back to, saying that the eyes of the NBA are on the NBL. The eyes of the world are on the NBL, on a global scale. As we get out recruiting, used to be a sales pitch to get a European to want to
trying to sugarcoat it a little bit.
Exactly like that. Now we've got people calling us.
Yeah.
And reaching out. You look at the participation numbers, going through the roof, prior to COVID. You look at the media rights deal, which is the biggest and best in the history of the league.
Yeah.
This isn't just propaganda. It's not just someone who's invested in the sport talking about it. This is the reality of where the sport is.
Yeah.
It's truly on the precipice of doing some really big things. And I think in terms of sports within Australia, in terms of how they're positioned to come out of COVID on the back end of these lockdowns, I couldn't be more excited about where the sport is. Like, truly primed to take real advantage of the situation.
Definitely. Homicide, when we had a chat with him the other week, I think he touched on something which was really, that really stuck with me is, although he's a bit of an outlier, someone like a Josh Giddey, the fact that he stays here, plays NBL, goes over and then gets drafted so high in the NBA draft has to have a massive impact on a lot of the junior players that are still in Australia that have the aspirations to go to either the NBA or the NBL. It's almost like, as an example, it's almost like the 4 minute mile or whatever. Like, you just don't really put two and two together until someone does it. And now that someone's done it, I think that opens up the potential for even just the hope that you can stay here and progress your game to get to the point where you're being watched by NBA scouts and potential to go overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. And the benefit that has for, participation numbers in the country, for, the opportunity for that young local talent to stay here and be comfortable that they're going to be seen and they're going to get that opportunity if it comes. And it's like I was saying before, it's now got to the point where we've got European talent, putting their hand up to say, well, no, I want to make the jump. I want to play in the NBA, and the best way to do that, the easiest way for me to get seen, is to come down and play in the NBL here in Australia. So I think that, there's so many benefits, off the back of that Next Stars program, but that Next Stars program is only as good as the clubs within the league, and the programs and the sort of, the talent that they're putting on the floor.
Just touching on some of the local players, or Aussie players, I guess you could say, myself coming from a basketball background, the goal those earlier days was always to eventually, whatever it may be, go over to college or play NBL or make it professionally as a basketballer. You coming from, being a player yourself and going through the whole process to making it to the NBL and playing at a professional level, like, what do you see these days as the best pathway for a junior to eventually be playing in the NBL? Is it hanging around here in Australia and playing NBL 1? Is it going over to college, or is it pretty varied? Or what's your opinion on the best pathway to make it to the league?
Yeah, look, that's such a difficult question and I get asked that one a lot, but it's a really difficult one to answer, holistically. It's different for individuals, every up and coming talent's got their own situation and potentially need different things, like some kid might really benefit from the experience of, heading over to the States and sort of, challenging themselves in a bit more of an uncomfortable situation. Others, might benefit from staying here, and they've got, some good coaches around them and sort of clear pathways to the next step. So I think there is there's so many different ways in which kids can sort of make their way through. You talk about the COE, and you talk about just coming through state league programs and being around a professional club and being at trainings. That's pretty much how I made my way onto a roster. So look, there's so many different ways, and to me it really does come down to the individual as to sort of what the best option out of all them is.
We've seen over the past few years teams here heading over and playing against some NBA teams for preseason games. Again, it was I think it was last year or maybe the season before where teams went over after round 1 or round 2, which seemed a bit odd. But what do you think the chances are? Obviously, at the moment with COVID, it's difficult. But what are the chances of in the future the NBA teams coming over here to play preseason games? I think that would just boost the league. Significantly, having an NBA team come and fill out an arena here to play a preseason game or a few games against some NBL guys. What do you think the odds of that are happening?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know in terms of sort of, I can't give you a sort of percentage, but I know that's something that the NBL and Australian basketball will be super keen on achieving at some point. Obviously, with COVID and the situation we're in at the moment, I can't imagine that it's going to happen, anytime in the short term or near future. But those games were, incredibly beneficial for Australian basketball. And, I personally, not speaking for the league, really hope that we can get back to a place where we at least get those games going again on US soil as soon as we can, because, it's a great exposure for the NBL and Australian talent. And then, fingers crossed that at some point down the line, we can sort of make that next jump and get a few of those teams out here.
Yeah, it'd be incredible, I reckon. Even the hype around, obviously, probably on a slightly bigger scale, but when the US were out here for the Boomers game the other year, like just the amount of people talking about it that probably weren't even basketball fans initially, I think it just builds such big hype. What you mentioned earlier in the chat about how obviously the first year you probably weren't going into the season with any expectation of winning a championship, although that was obviously the goal. When do you, in your eyes, like when does that get to a point where you're going into the season expecting to be competing for a championship? Obviously last year there was a few difficulties throughout the season. We was including COVID, but even off-court stuff that seemed to throw the season all over the place. When do you think it's a realistic expectation to go into the season expecting to win the championship?
Yeah, well, I think, from a members and fans sort of point of view, that expectation needs to be every year, Like I said from the start, we wanted to come in and be competitive immediately. The goal has always been to win a championship, even if that was seemingly unrealistic in sort of that first season. But I think that we made great strides during last off season, and we saw the benefits of that last year. Making a semi-final and taking a game off the eventual winner, and we're hoping we can make similar strides this year. So for us, we definitely see ourselves as having enough local talent on the roster now to be able to make a real push for a championship. We feel like there's a bit of a window here for us in terms of that Australian talent we have over the next sort of 2-3 years. So, we're absolutely sort of setting the table for making a run.
That's unreal. I think obviously any of the fans that are tuning into the episode would be super excited to hear that. Obviously yourself coming from a playing background as a professional and winning championships, what do you think assuming that it's, we'll manifest it now that the Phoenix win a championship within the next couple of years, which would be nice. What do you think the difference in the feeling of winning that championship will be as a player compared to, being a CEO of the club and having that more of the kind of, not behind the scenes, but the back end control of the team compared to being on the court yourself?
Yeah, hard one to answer until we get to that point.
Until it happens.
Until it happens. But yeah, it's a really good question. I'm not actually sure how to answer that. I'm sure it'll have some sort of subtle differences, but being a competitor and yourself being a competitive type of guy, I think it will have a fair amount of similarity in the feeling as well. That the work that goes into everything that's happened to get to that point, and sort of culminates, in that result. I would think that it would have a somewhat of a similar feeling, but we've got a long road ahead of us to get to anything like that. So we are definitely nose down, bum up at the moment.
In terms of the, I guess the emotional side of the position you're in now with the team. Like, does it feel similar to when you were a player, going throughout the season, when there's a win, when there's a loss, come finals time? Do you still get that similar kind of feeling in regards to maybe nerves or disappointment after a loss and stuff like that? Or are you more now look at it as not so much a business standpoint, but more of like a bit more perspective on the overall season or how the team's going and progressing and whatnot?
I think the answer I'm supposed to give here is that I've got great perspective in the moment, and I sort of take right all the bumps with relative ease. But the reality of the situation is, in the moment, in the game, the frustration of not being able to impact in any meaningful way does lead itself to still remaining nervous and feeling the hurt and joy of wins and losses. So I think that post results, it's definitely have definitely gained a whole lot more perspective on the broader picture of things and context of the season and how that all sort of fits in place. But in the moment itself, sadly, I've still yet to be able to pull myself out of the emotion of the actual moment.
I bet it's not easy to do. With the clearly the past two seasons have been all over the place, and things just in general are still pretty all over the place at the moment. But how do you see the 21-22 season going in regards to how it plays out with games, where they're going to be, and travel and restrictions and all that type of shit? Like, do you guys have any indication of what the season's going to look like? Are they planning just to have it as a normal season, do you know, or is it going to be hubs and games in certain states and stuff like that?
And everything changes so quickly. But I think that, it's pretty obvious that at least for the first portion of the season, there's going to be, COVID impacts on what's going on and how the season is delivered. We remain really hopeful, and it's the league's priority to play as many games for as many clubs in front of their home fans. So that being the sort of key philosophy, we're confident that, we'll play, all, of our games in front of our fans, or at least a portion of our fans, and sort of remaining sort of positive that that start date of November 18 is when we kick things off, and that game's in front of very passionate Phoenix members.
Yeah. Unreal. Just obviously we've spoken a lot about the Phoenix and whatnot throughout the chat today, but coming off such a successful career yourself, like, what was for you? Obviously winning a championship has to be, I would imagine, the ultimate, but what was like some of the most memorable moments for you as a player?
Oh, memorable moments. All sort of molds into one. The championships definitely, like you said, that's sort of, some of the biggest moments. There is one sort of thing which tied into a championship, which really stands out to me. We had, who were we playing? I should know the answers to this, but it's in a grand final series. I think it was against Sydney. We lost game 4, I think. And we were supposed to win that and win the championship here in Melbourne. We were up by 20 points or something like that. It was
right.
It's the game where Gorge ran around the court with his fist.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember. And, back in the locker room after that game was just, heartbreak, because the champagne was on ice. We're in Melbourne. Yeah.
It was going to be awesome. We were ready to go. And, we all sit there for, an hour after the game and then finally leave. And I remember on the way home getting a text message from Chris Anstey, which he sent to the entire playing group. And, I'm not going to be able to sort of relay it verbatim, but it was just basically a sort of inspirational message of like, we're not done here. Like, we're the best team in this. We're going to fly up to Sydney. We're going to take that win, and we're going to celebrate on their court up in New South Wales and win this championship. I remember reading that sort of text message. Still today, I'm giving myself chills thinking about it.
Yeah, I bet.
It was just one of those sort of moments that is sort of now etched in my basketball memory of, that was sort of a really big moment in time. And, after that, to go up there and then win it was just sort of poetry. Yeah.
100%. Do you have, in regards to with the playing group now, like how much say do you have to do with the playing group after, say, a tough loss or even after a big win? Like in terms of, you've obviously got the perspective and you've got the experience there to be able to, understand what the players are probably going through. Do you kind of go in and have your say to the group as well, or do you just leave that up to Simon, or how does that kind of play out?
Yeah, no, I leave that to the performance department. I leave that with Simon, and he's with the group every single day. And so he knows in a lot more detail what's going on and the nuances in the group. So I leave that completely to him. Obviously, I've got my own relationships with a lot of the players, and we'll talk with them throughout the week in sort of preparation and post games. But in terms of the group itself, I truly leave all of that to our head coach, Simon Mitchell, and he's responsible for all of that.
Awesome, mate. Well, before we wrap things up, I just wanted to ask you, in terms of, you've had a few good signings coming into this next season. Is there anyone in particular? Obviously, the answer is probably meant to be that you're excited to watch everyone play. But is there anyone in particular that you're really looking forward to seeing how they go in this coming season that maybe the fans probably haven't seen before, or maybe not expecting?
I can talk to a couple. I think I'm excited to see Ryan Brokoff this season. Obviously. With a bit of stability behind him, a proper preseason under his belt. I think that it's going to be a very different story for him going into this year, which is super exciting given the level of talent that he is. Obviously, Xavier Munford, who we announced the other day. This guy is going to be fun. Fans are going to enjoy watching this guy play.
Oh, that's unreal.
He knows how to put the ball in the hole. 100% looking forward to seeing him play. And I actually think that, that we're going to see another step from Ruben Tarangi as well, who's put in a really monstrous off-season here. And he's looking really good on the floor.
He hit some really good form coming the back end of last season.
Yeah, he really did. So the second half of last year, people were talking about his three-point shot for the first half of the year, but he really started to turn it on that second half and back end, he said. So he's an incredible talent, still so young, still incredibly young. Yeah. And I think that, he's sort of primed to do some big things in the NBL as well.
Brilliant. Well, mate, I'm sure I can speak for all the fans listening, and we're excited for the season to get started again. Hopefully it's as smooth as possible this time round. With COVID and whatnot. But, mate, appreciate your time for joining us on the show today. I think a lot of people would have enjoyed the episode. So a big thanks for joining us.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me on, and thanks so much for your support as well. We really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, mate. And for everyone who's tuned in, a big thank you to you as well. We'd love for you to take a screenshot of this episode, post it up on Instagram story for us, tag myself, tag Tommy. I'll put the Phoenix socials in the show notes as well. Make sure you get around them for this up and coming season. And I'll hopefully catch you at the games, mate. Thanks again.
Man, good on you. See you, mate.